Welcome to another ministry video from Muswell Hill Baptist Church. In this ministry video, we're looking at one of the ways that Jesus describes himself in Matthew chapter 9. And this chapter follows on from the question of the disciples on the Sea of Galilee after Jesus calmed the storm, where they said, "What kind of man is this, that even the winds and the waves obey him?" And we're thinking about what kind of man Jesus was. He was the Son of God and the Son of Man. And now we see in Matthew chapter 9 the calling of Matthew, whose gospel this is, and how that happened. As Jesus went on from there, he saw a man named Matthew sitting at the tax collector's booth. "Follow me," he told him. And Matthew got up and followed him. Tax collectors are never popular, but there were some special features about tax collection in the Roman Empire. The Romans collected lots of taxes, and out of that they built many of the lovely things that have survived through the years that we admire when we're visiting historical sites. It all cost money, and the money was raised usually by taxation. The way the Romans collected taxes was via one of their officials called a censor, and the way he collected them from people was to appoint tax collectors. And so it was that Matthew was one of those people that he would have appointed. Now, when we say appointed, what we really mean is that the job was franchised out usually to the lowest bidder as far as we could work things out. And so anybody who had the nous to collect money from people and who could bid low enough to the censor would get the job. And of course the job involved taking money from the Jewish people, from the Galileans in Matthew's case, and from passers-by from other parts of the world, and getting it to the Romans. But it was more complicated than that. If you were very wealthy, there would be all kinds of wealth taxes. The Romans were quite imaginative about their taxations. And a wealthy person might well give some money to the tax collector in order to get let off some of their taxes. Furthermore, the tax collector was able to take taxes that were not necessarily due and keep that part for himself. We could read in the New Testament the story of Zacchaeus, another tax collector, who when he met with Jesus and Jesus went to his house for tea, said that he would return any money fourfold that he had taken from people, which is a kind of admission that that was something that tax collectors were known for. Well, we don't know quite how Matthew set about what he did, but as a tax collector, it would be surprising if he hadn't been involved in some of that skullduggery. Either way, tax collectors were disliked not only because they took money and often kept money that they shouldn't, but also because they were working effectively for the Romans, or rather for themselves on behalf of the Romans. And as the Romans were the occupiers, that was not a popular thing to be doing. Jesus comes to where Matthew is, calls him to follow him as his disciple, and Matthew leaves his taxation system and follows Jesus. Verse 10. While Jesus was having dinner at Matthew's house, many tax collectors and sinners came and ate with him and his disciples. In good Middle Eastern hospitality fashion, Matthew calls people to a meal, and anybody can really join in. That was the way things were. And inevitably along came tax collectors, the people who were Matthew's natural friends, and sinners. Now in church we use the word sinners for all of us, because all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. And in God's eyes we are indeed all sinners. But sinners in these passages in the New Testament has a special meaning, which is referring to people who were known to be non-compliant with religious practice. They either didn't go to the synagogue, they didn't keep the festivals properly, they behaved in ways that society regarded as immoral or unjust. They were people who were generally regarded as bad. Verse 11. When the Pharisees saw this, they asked Jesus' disciples, "Why does your teacher eat with tax collectors and sinners?" In every religion, keeping up appearances is very important. And for the Pharisees and their religion, keeping up appearances was important. They wouldn't have cared that tax collectors and sinners mixed together because they disregarded all of them. But they were concerned about Jesus. Of course, Jesus was already trouble to the religious establishment of his day. But although he was trouble, he was also popular. And at the very least, they wanted him to be under some kind of control, to behave somewhat decently. And therefore they asked this question: why is your rabbi, they ask his disciples, mixing with people like this? Keeping up appearances is very important to religion, but it is not very important to love. And it is not at all important to mercy. And as we are about to see, Jesus casts his role, his ministry, himself. What kind of man is this? He casts it in terms of mercy. Verse 12. On hearing this, Jesus said, "It is not the healthy who need a doctor, but those who are ill." Jesus' response makes the simplest of points, that he has come to be the one who saves, who restores, who brings people back. It's absolutely the right thing for the doctor to be with the sick and not with the well, those who think there's nothing wrong with them. Jesus has come to save people, and so he's with the people who need to be saved. The Pharisees need to keep up their religion. And keeping up their religion does not involve salvation. It involves separation. It involves keeping away from all the people who need love and mercy, who need grace and compassion. And in these moments, Jesus separates himself from the prevailing religion of the day and from a lot of our religion too, where we are more concerned about how we look and how we are than who we reach with the message of salvation. In Luke's Gospel, when Jesus announces how he is going to set about his ministry. He quotes these words, "The Spirit of the Lord is on me, because he has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim freedom for the prisoners and recovery of sight for the blind, to set the oppressed free, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favour." Back in Matthew chapter 9, Jesus continues in verse 13. "But go and learn what this means. I desire mercy, not sacrifice. For I have not come to call the righteous, but sinners." And here Jesus justifies his kind of position like a doctor who mixes with those who others would steer clear of, by quoting concerning God. And of course, Jesus is God and comes from God. Later in the New Testament, the Apostle Paul, who was himself saved from that religious respectability and keeping up appearances, says this as he has now met and learned about Jesus. Here is a trustworthy saying that deserves full acceptance. Christ Jesus came into the world to save sinners, of whom I am the worst. It's fantastic news if you need a doctor, someone to make you whole again. It's fantastic news if you need mercy, someone to show you something you do not deserve, but to pick you up. It's fantastic news if you have a heart for such people. But if you just like religion, this might be one of the more challenging things that Jesus ever said.